Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast are many people, all of whom have lots of things to say today, and all of whom, well, two of whom in particular, maybe me being one of them, would like to run like the wind from the predictions they made last year. I'm going to start with the other one of them. Hello, Jeremy Cohen. How are you?
Hey, John. I was great when I saw what our predictions were last year, and I realized we got to do this all over again, which gives us a chance at redemption, but also, not great.
Well, I went and checked my calendar book because I'm old and I have a calendar book from last year when we recorded this. And I noticed that I had checked into rehab hours after making my predictions because apparently I was both drunk and high when I recorded that episode. So I take no responsibility. I blame it on the hooch. Next up, we have our esteemed colleagues and guests from Locked On Knicks. I don't know who wants to go first. Age before beauty. Alex Wolfe. Hello, sir.
Hey, what's going on? Way to give away my age. Thank you. Yeah,
you're younger than
me. True. That is true. I'm feeling pretty good about my predictions from last year. I know at least one hit, which I feel like is all you need in this world is for one bold prediction out of 3 to hit because they're bold. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm ready to knock another one out of the park like my New York Mets. Let's go Mets.
Love it. Yeah, in there. Well, if one counts as a success, then I will move on to the next success story on our show. Gavin Schall. Hello, Gavin. How are you?
Yeah, I was going back and tracking. It's gone from like really far off to kind of close to one right and almost kind of the second one right. So maybe a good sign for this year for everyone except Mikal Bridges, but I won't get too far ahead of myself.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We're going to hit on, so this episode, we're recording it on Saturday morning. The Knicks played a preseason game in Washington last night. I have a feeling we will touch on some of the storylines from that game as we go through the episode and we get into our predictions. But first, let us take a look back at last year when, we said some things, and those things that were said have now come back. The chickens have come home to roost. Alex, you are at the top, so I'm going to let you read off your 3 predictions first from last year.
So I had the Knicks fall into the bottom 10 in defensive rating, but finish top 2 in offense. That I don't even think I need to check to know that did not come to fruition. Not so much. So that, whatever. But this next one nailed it. Julius Randle makes a second straight All-Star game, but Jalen Brunson will get both an All-Star and an All-NBA. That happened. Maybe Julius Randle could have gotten his All-NBA had he not gotten injured as well. And then Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein will average 5.5 stocks per game. They fell up well short of that. I think, even putting aside the fact that they barely played at the same time together for most of last year, they averaged, I think it was 4.6.
Okay. That's not terrible.
It sounds close, but it's pretty far off.
I forget if we got on you about how bold the Randall Brunson prediction was. That feels like maybe a 5 or a 6 out of 10 on the
I can confirm one Jonathan Macri was like, so the Knicks are going to get 2 All-Stars?
Okay. Wow.
Yes, it was.
So even when I wasn't making
we got on you for that. One Knicks scouting Jonathan Macri did, which, speaking of Knicks scouting, let's talk about Jalen Brunson's top 5 MVP finish that Alex nailed. That Gavin nailed last year. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm not going to get to build off it this year, but one of us is. Jalen Brunson finished top 5 in MVP, just barely. I did not feel good about that in the first half of the season, but it came around. I had Knicks will finish top 5 in fast break points. I looked it up last night. I was telling you guys pre-show. They finished 11th, which I did not remember. I thought it was like 20th. I was like, oh, that one's not going to look good. They finished 11th, and I initially wrote down 10th in our group chat. So I'm going to take a mini win on that one. And then Joel Embiid will be a Knick by the time we do this crossover next season. No, but another all-star big is, so kind of spirit of the idea, close-ish. I'm taking the win. I've never been close before. So.
You should have said either Joel Embiid or one of his mortal enemies will be a Knick.
Yeah, someone who's choked him during an NBA game.
There you go.
One of the two.
Okay.
Could you have ever predicted how much vitriol that prediction would give you now.
Yeah,
a year later.
It doesn't look good, right? Alex, I was really, really careful to massage and frame that the right way, and you're blowing it up. So let's move on to Jon and Jeremy.
Oh yeah, please let's move on to me. So I again, because I just love RJ Barrett so much, I had to make a positive RJ Barrett prediction that he would finish top 100 in VORP. I checked Basketball Reference today. He finished 156th in value over replacement player, so I was off by a little bit. But that was a shining star prediction compared to this next one, which was that Evan Fournier would play more non-garbage time minutes than Deuce McBride or Jericho Sims last year. I think Evan Fournier played about 37 non-garbage time minutes. I'm making that up. It might not have even been that many. So that's an L. And then last but not least, and I was feeling good about this one, the Knicks would finish first in free throw rate. And last year, sure enough, was, I think, if not their worst, one of their worst free throw rate seasons under Tibbs. They finished 14th, according to Cleaning the Glass. So not my best moment. Thankfully, I wasn't alone. Hi, Jeremy.
Misery loves company, huh? So I said Isaiah Hartenstein will average at least 1 3-point attempts per game. He averaged 3. Sorry, he shot 3. He shot 3 3-pointers last year. I'm a little annoyed because he had 37 the year before that. Also, he's in Oklahoma City now, and it seems that that's a shot that he'll probably be using more of. So there's a chance that that number looks good once he's healthy in Oklahoma City, but that does not apply to this season's bold predictions. I said the Knicks will trade for Donovan Mitchell next summer. I believe what I also said was I didn't want it, but I also felt like, oh, that's someone they'll target because it's the Cleveland factor of it, and who knows. Obviously did not happen. In fact, the Knicks went in a very different direction. Instead of trading for one of the smaller players in the NBA, they trade for one of the larger players in the NBA. And finally, Mitchell Robinson will get at least one Defensive Player of the Year award vote. Of course, Mitch was ineligible due to the lack of games that he played. With that being said, I felt like what we saw in the beginning of the season, that prediction was on the right track, but it didn't matter because he didn't play the games to qualify. But he played great.
You get a half a point for that one. What's worse, my Fournier non-garbage time minutes or your Hartenstein 3-point attempts per game?
I mean, Fournier was banished from the team effectively. Mine was
shot
just
3 threes.
Yeah, but he still played consistently. I mean, he was on the court.
That makes the prediction worse because he was playing a lot and he still didn't shoot threes.
You get non-garbage time minutes. You believed in him at a point where no one else did, except maybe a few people.
Maybe a few people. Maybe his family. Okay, so here's how this works. I believe I am up first, which means I actually have to open our Twitter group chat to remember what the hell it is that I predicted about a half an hour ago. And here we go. Okay, so I'm starting us off. First prediction, and yes, like the Fournier one last year, there's some recency bias for this. Deuce McBride starts more games than Josh Hart this year, but Josh Hart will finish more games than Deuce. So for anybody who may have missed it, after the Washington game, Josh Hart was doing his usual media scrum, and when asked about how he's feeling or whatever, the question actually wasn't part of the transcription. He said, "I'm lost." And he talked about how he's trying to find his way. And, we have however many days until Boston to get our chemistry together and everything. And then he ended the quote by saying, or intimating the possibility of him maybe moving into the bench unit and out of the starting lineup. And maybe that would help things. I wasn't sure that I was going to make a prediction with this because Josh Hart, frankly, just says a lot of nonsense. And I don't know at this point, should we take anything that he says seriously? But the fact that he was so he actively brought up the possibility of moving to the bench raised an eyebrow with me only because it's not like the thought of moving Deuce McBride, presumably, or it might be someone else into the starting lineup is that far-fetched. So Alex, I'm going to go to you first. What are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, on the Josh Hart front, I think that this is kind of par for the course for him, right? Like he's very outspoken with the media. We brought it up during our player preview for him. Like he didn't really have any qualms last year about going straight to the media and being like, I don't think I'm getting involved enough. I don't know how to find my way here, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's easy to forget because he had such a crazy, awesome close to the year. But I mean, things like early on were not fantastic with him.
No.
You know, I'm not saying that I thought that he was going to ask for a trade or anything, but he certainly was being very vocal about the fact that he was not happy with what his role was, that he was not happy with his level of involvement and that sort of thing. And, you know, is that going to be the case? I mean, so when we recorded our Hart preview, we were still kind of under the impression that it was before the Cat trade. So we were like, okay, how is he going to adjust to splitting the top bench role with Dante DiVincenzo? Like, is he such a rhythm player that that's going to mess with him? You know, to your point, I guess maybe this is bold, but not the boldest, because I think that we've kind of seen that, like, the best way for Hart to be the best version of himself is to be in a role where he can, you know, dictate things a little more. And he definitely can't do that. He definitely can't do that in this starting unit, as we've seen. So maybe he ultimately makes the push to come off the bench. And, you know, if he's saying that to the media, I feel like there is definitely a chance that that's something that he really wants and that he will probably make a vocal push for behind the scenes too. So, you know, on the spicy scale, I wouldn't make this super Scoville spicy. You know what I mean? This is low on the Scoville scale, but I do think that just based off how much Tibbs loves Hart and will want to have him start, that this does still qualify as a pretty bold take.
Gavin, do you like the idea of Deuce in the starting five?
Yeah, so I'm kind of okay with both, but I think where it's becoming increasingly more plausible is after the Landry Shamet injury. It's just really hard structurally to get a bench unit out there that makes sense without moving Josh Hart to the bench. And you have to kind of start pulling guys early, putting guys back in late, unless you want to go with the possible prediction later and you think Pacome Dadier is going to play a big role this year. That certainly changes things. But I think Josh Hart, he's kind of a walking contradiction in that he's like sometimes totally reckless, but is also one of the smartest players in the NBA. And I think he almost gets in his own way because he consistently has this booming thought in his head, like, hey, I could take a three, but Jalen doing literally anything is a more efficient play. And you see him get really passive. And I think that's what's happening now in a starting lineup full of, or at least with three of, but like even OG, like three or four of like the most hyper efficient offensive players in basketball. Like there's that like thought in his head constantly, like, I should not be the one shooting the basketball. And a lot of times Josh kind of needs to be like put into a corner to come out and say like, screw this. Like I'm going hard. Like we saw it last year during that Mavs game where literally everyone was hurt and it was him and Dante. And I made this analogy before, but it was like an old Western where like two guys are stuck in the corner, bearing down the gates, whole army's coming. And he said, you know what? I'm going to go 3 for 3 with Luka Doncic. We saw in the playoffs last year, he said, they're going to leave me open. Everyone else is hurt. I'm going to start bombing threes. And that's when he plays his best. And you're only getting that version of Josh Hart with the bench. There's a ton of utility he can provide the starting lineup. There's a lot of like little things that help them, but is he maximizing all those little things? Not really. So I think there's a world where inevitably getting the best version of him and letting him get some momentum to play well with this lineup at the end of games requires him coming off the bench. So I think there's a lot of logic to it. I'm with Alex. I don't think it's insanely spicy, but I think it's totally plausible.
I think this is both a major compliment and also a knock. I think Josh Hart is the ultimate self-starter in the NBA. But if he's not self-starting, then we have a problem. And it's like, just look at his play this preseason. Like he hasn't gotten there. I was chalking it up to, hey, it's preseason, but maybe it's more than that. Jeremy, would you be shocked if Deuce was in the starting lineup on Tuesday night?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd say yes. Specifically for Tuesday, sure. I think they're going to ride this lineup out as long as they can. And if they have to make adjustments, they can. I don't think it's that spicy to say that Deuce is a starter over Hart. What I'm curious about, though, is it, I know your prediction is Deuce, so that's fine, but is it Precious Achiuwa? In the thought of, at what point has Tibbs shown he's comfortable going smaller than the Knicks are? Maybe he does feel like he has that flexibility with a 6'8" Anunoby and a 6'7" Bridges. But, you know, if we're considering, or how we're considering Josh Hart, especially if he comes to the bench, and then you bring up a bench unit because, you know, he did more of a hockey rotation in the preseason. Not to say that's what he will do in the regular season, but seeing Sims and Achua and Shamet, Payne, and McBride, at moments that was fine because it was balanced. But now if you take Deuce out of that, how are you impacting the spacing around? Sort of touching on what Gavin was talking about. So I just wonder, is the priority for the Knicks the offensive rebounding, and that what you're losing with Deuce, is it actually bold then to, if you consider Precious as a legitimate option to replace Hart in Tibbs's mind, does it then actually make the argument that Deuce is starting more games than Hart even bolder? It might.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I look at the lineup that he ended up going with for the close of the regular season when they were banged up, and then ultimately in the playoffs, which again, when they were banged up, but like he rolled out there with Deuce and DiVincenzo next to Brunson. So it's not like he's completely averse to the idea of going smallish. And again, in this scenario, it would be, Bridges at the 3. So you're not as small. I don't think that's crazy at all. So, and to answer my own question, I would not be shocked if we saw a starting lineup change in game 1. I'd be surprised. I would not be shocked though. So we'll see what happens. Jeremy, I believe that you are up.
So it's my turn, yes, and I'm going to go with Pacome Dadier plays over 500, and we'll say non-garbage time minutes this season. Now, this would have been extremely bold before the Landry Shamet injury. Here's why I think it's still bold in general. We don't know exactly what the Knicks are doing with Landry Shamet. They don't have to waive him. They can keep him. His salary doesn't get guaranteed until January. So the Knicks could conceivably keep him on the books and then figure it out in January or shortly before then. He's a rookie. He's 18, 19 years old. We saw some of the catch and shoot abilities, and he had some great reads, but this is a contending team. And we also know that Tibbs has a certain level of comfort for some players. Shamet could, of course, come back. The Knicks could dump Shamet and find someone else to soak up minutes. TJ Warren is on the team, for example. There's a possibility he's there full time and displaces Dadier. He could just struggle. He could run into a rookie wall. The Knicks could trade for someone, and it could limit how much playtime he has. So it's hard to get there. Now, if you look at past rookies like Grimes, played more than 500 minutes, non-garbage time minutes in his rookie season. Miles McBride did not. He played, I believe, 325. But the difference between that team and this team is that team was okay, and this team is really good. So the amount of minutes and the opportunity cost of giving time to someone who perhaps has not earned it or is not trusted, rather, is something to consider. So I'm going to go with over 500 for Pacome Dadier.
Alex, I'm going to throw it to you while I add up some stats here to put this prediction into context. What do you think about can we get a nickname for Pacome? Can it be, is it just like Daddy O? I don't know. Do we have a good one here?
I think some people have been saying Pack Daddy.
I don't like that. I'd rather just go with Who's Your Daddy, but that maybe speaks to my sensibilities. What do you think of him?
I'm glad to hear someone else is drinking the Kool-Aid on this.
Okay.
Because I made this case on our show just the other day where we were like, Shamet's hurt. Like, what do you do? Who do you get? Whatever, like what's the plan now? Like, this kind of throws a big wrench. And like I thought Shamet was primed to have a really big year. I'm not saying that he was going to come in and be Dante DiVincenzo and like set the new, Knicks 3-point record. But I think that he was going to come in and give you probably a solid like 15-ish minutes a game where he was going to just take and make a ton of threes. And I unfortunately don't know at this point in the off season, if you want to still call it that, the preseason, whatever, there's just not another guy like that just hanging out on, free agency right now. You can just go snag. Like, they really lucked out in many ways by getting him on the contract that they did, I think, because he's a real NBA player. And I think one of the NBA middle class guys that's kind of suffering from the new CBA right now. And not getting the type of money that he probably deserves, which is more like mid-level exception type money. But it's, a lot of players are now being tasked with, do you choose being a winner or do you choose, money, basically?
Yeah.
It's one of those two things. And so losing him was a huge blow. And I kind of made the case of like, but what if they just gave Tyler Kolek and Pacom Dadier some of those minutes and tried to make it work and see if one of them sticks? And I hope that is the case. I think that Pacom did a good job for himself in these last couple preseason games of showing what he has to potentially offer, which is even if his entire role on the bench unit is just stand in the corner and take and make threes on offense, and then just like keep your guy in front of you on defense for 8 to 10 minutes a game, I think he could probably pull it off. And maybe there's something to be said for like, it makes more sense to have him play in Westchester so he could get more minutes and work on his game more that way, a la how they did it with Deuce McBride for, a time, and how they've done it with Jericho Sims and, a couple other rookies. But I'm kind of on board with giving him a shot at the pro level at this point. The 3-point shot, it looks like he put up about 1 million threes during the offseason. And that's reason enough for me to say, hey, give the kid a shot, like see if it works. And then, he's probably not going to be ideal, but that gives you the flexibility to hold on to Shamet until he gets healthy, hopefully. And then, you can tackle things from there once Shamet gets healthy again and potentially send Dadier to the G League or whatever. But in the early season, I say give him a shot.
Gavin?
Yeah, I really like it. I think that comes out to what, like a little over 6 minutes a game. If theoretically he played 80 games,
if he played in every one, realistically, probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I was going to say the more realistic is probably like 40 games and he gets to 12 minutes because once Shamet is back, he would really have to impress to still have a spot in the rotation, assuming they end up keeping Shamet. But I'm with Alex. I like everything I see. My hesitation in going that far, as we kind of debated on our show, was I think there are going to be real issues defensively that raise Tom Thibodeau's blood pressure to dangerous levels for a man his age. But I think he might just have to survive that, especially because I don't think there's going to be like a ton of total brain fart moments, which is shocking for a 19-year-old. Like he just seems like to have an exceptional basketball IQ. Offensively, I think his cutting just as much as his shooting is going to be the thing that makes him playable. We've seen in these preseason games, whenever Brunson and Cat run any kind of action together, there's like generally nail help. And there's an opportunity if you're a wing, particularly the less threatening of the two wings on the floor, to cut to the basket for a dunk. He got one the other day. He got a couple, I think, in that Hornets game. Like he is a really smart, really intuitive cutter, clearly can shoot the ball, had a really nice, like little like double pump pass to Hook Porty. Like if you help at the rim and slide over, he can do that. So it is a big jump. He didn't really look ready for summer ball. I'm still like holding out. Like, does this 3-point shooting hold up over time? Because the shot really didn't look ready to me over summer league. I've watched it over and over again. Looks beautiful. Looks way ahead of where Mikal Bridges is somehow. So I could definitely see it. I do think there's just going to be a lot of growing pains one-on-one. Athletically, he's going to get there. But right now, like just watching him try to stick with Jared Butler in the open court the other day, like looked really, really slow by comparison. So I think that is going to be a challenging adjustment against the best teams in the NBA if Tibbs wants to go with it.
So I got a little data here. Last year, for the 2023-24 rookie class, almost exactly half of the rookies played at least 500 minutes. 28 of 58 picks played at least 500 minutes. Of those, 10 played for teams that ended up in the eventual playoff field. And of those 10, 6 were taken outside the lottery. Those 6 were Jaime Jaquez Jr., taken 18th, Podziemski for Golden State, taken 19th, Ben Shepherd for Indiana, taken 26th. Julian Strawther, did not realize he played that many minutes. He was just over 500, taken 29th. He was in Denver. Andre Jackson Jr. from Milwaukee, talk about a quiet 572 minutes. He was taken 36th. And then Trace Jackson Davis, 57th overall. He was in Golden State. Here's the only big thing for me. Every one of those players was 21 or over for last season, except Podziemski, who turned 21 midway through the season. Obviously, Dadier is one of the youngest players in the NBA at 19 years old. All that being said, Jeremy, I love this pick, and not only do I love this prediction, it's, I think, out of everybody's, maybe give or take one that's coming from Alex, it's the one that I'm rooting for the most, because I just think, how cool would it be? Because Tibbs is not going to play him unless he's like, this guy gives us the best chance to win out of all those spots. If they actually drafted a kid at 19 that Tom Thibodeau thinks gives them the best chance to win, that's a massive, massive, massive win for the organization. And I don't think it's nuts at all based on what we've seen in the preseason. The fact that he got out there in the first half, ostensibly competing for a rotation spot against the Wizards, I thought that was pretty cool. I like the prediction. Okay. Now it's time for one of our more esteemed predictors to go up. Alex, trying to go 3 for 3 this year. Are you going to start off with the big one?
I was thinking about that. I think I'm going to save the biggest one to lead off our show. If I'm being,
I think that's how
you gotta hold some stuff back for when it hits your own show. I'm actually going to go in reverse order with my picks, or at least start at the end. The one that I came up with this morning, half groggy, woken up in my hotel room here because I couldn't think of a third prediction last night, and I was like, what should I go with? And I really hope this one comes true. I think this is the one you were just mentioning that you're rooting for the most, probably, or nearly the most, because I think we all should be. And it's that OG Anunoby appears in over 65 games in the regular season.
I like it.
This is risky. This is extremely risky. OG does not do this that often. In fact, I think I'm going to look right now and do this in real time. He's played in 74 games his rookie year, 67 games the next year, 69 games the year after that. And beyond that, it has gotten a little rough recently. 43 games in 2020 to 21, 48 games in 21 to 22, 67 games in 22 to 23, and then 50 games last year. So I'm fighting the odds pretty hard here. 3 out of the last 4 years, he has not achieved this feat. I've been burned with this sort of viewpoint before, because I've said this about Mitchell Robinson for years, or at least I did until the most recent spat of lower body injuries. But last year, I think, was sort of a fluke with OG's injuries. The one in the playoffs, unfortunately, was the most real one. Him just, tweaking a hammy. That's the one that worries me the most. But the elbow spur thing was not something that he's ever going to have to deal with again, unless he takes another hard fall to his elbow. And had he not had that, he probably would have hit this number last year. Like, even with the elbow spur, I know it started affecting his shot after a certain point and the pain got to be too much and whatever, but he looks good. I mean, he's in phenomenal shape. As long as the training staff can keep him limber and, his play style. I mean, I've already seen he looked arguably a little too reluctant to use his athleticism in the preseason, I think, which was leading to him getting stuffed under the rim a lot and stuff like that. But, if he strikes that right balance, I could see him playing in potentially 70 games this year or something. He's going to have some times where he's going to tweak something or whatever, like just the nature of OG Anunoby at this point, I think. But there's nothing really to statistically back it up. You just got to cross your fingers with this one. But I think that he will play 65 games or more this year.
Gavin?
Yeah, I hope it happens. I don't know how you predict that, but I really hope it happens. I agree with you. It was kind of fluky, but that's like talking to people who covered the Raptors for years when they traded for him last year. Like, that's his whole history is fluky injuries, right? It's not Joel Embiid where you're like, well, he broke a bone in his foot and he's like 7'2", 300 pounds. So that's going to be an issue for his entire career, right? There's not like this one thing to point to. And he just, for whatever reason, seems to pick them up. I do think the depth the Knicks have will help him. I think Tom Thibodeau has the luxury of being a little bit more protective with him and his minutes and his usage, and the fact that because they made the Cat trade, like, he's not going to be playing small ball 5 pretty much ever unless Cat is hurt. So I do think there are some things pointing the right way. They could be transformative for the next season if it happens. I think it's bold though, because like, his injuries have always been just unpredictable. And the history there says that's going to continue unless the Knicks get kind of lucky this year, which hopefully they do.
I think both of you guys kind of touched on this issue of like, what is causing these injuries? Is it anything causing it? Is it kind of freak things? Like, how much does the wear and tear of him guarding the opposing team's best player night after night, how would that affect him? I feel like in the preseason, we've seen some moments where he's guarding another very good player, some moments where he's not hiding on a weaker offensive player, but placed on a weaker offensive player so he could come over and protect from the corner or, help in the middle or whatever the case may be. So I'll be curious how he's deployed, if they're thinking that could affect this one way or another. I mean, if he plays 70 games, the Knicks are going to be freaking awesome, barring some crazy injury to somebody else that we know is important as well. Jeremy, any thoughts on this one?
I love the prediction. I certainly hope it happens, as I'm sure everyone listening to this does. It's definitely bold. Just based on what recent history says, to your point of 3 of the last 4 years playing under that amount, being able to keep him fresh. With that said, there's a question, of course, of hardware and what he's qualified for at the end of the year, which, of course, that 65 game threshold, is that something that he shoots for, especially on a larger contract? There are more responsibilities now. The expectations are a little bit greater, although something tells me if you asked OG Anunoby what he cares about most, he'd probably say winning. And whatever it is to keep him fresh so that they could win a title. So I'm going to go with a bold prediction, but I like it, Alex.
Yeah. No, it's bold, but it's solid. Okay. Last of the first round of predictions, Gavin Schall, sir.
All right. I will not bum out the esteemed KFS audience with my extremely depressing one. I'll save that for my Locked On Knicks fans who are used to it.
It is depressing.
Yeah. I'm not going that dark this early. I'm going to wait till 7:30 local time. So I'm going to go OG Anunoby, continuing the OG Anunoby momentum, makes his first makes first team all defense for the first time in his career. He made second team. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. The reason for this is I think he's looked incredible this preseason, playing defense. And you know what? If he gets to 65 games, he has to get to 65 games. In some ways, that I'm making Alex's bold prediction plus more, right? Because he has to get there to qualify. Anyways, but a couple of things I'm basing this on. One, I think my biggest concern when they traded for him was his steal and block rate kind of dropping off precipitously when he was in Toronto. I was like, all right, are like all these injuries catching up to him? Is he losing his athleticism? In his 20s, last year on the Raptors, he had, after his second season, he had never been below 88th percentile in steal rate. On the Raptors, he was 47th percentile. He was averaging basically half as many steals per whatever as he had the year before. On the Knicks, it shot up to 96th percentile. His block percentage had never been over 1.1%, rose up to 1.5%. It's clear on a great team, win motivated, he can ramp up the activity. And I think it's going to be necessary this year. He's looked, John, you'll appreciate this reference, to quote the great Zach Lowe on Kawhi Leonard, kind of Sharktopus-esque, where there are just all these plays where it feels like opposing players will just run normal actions the way they do normally, and they're not taking into account that there's a superhero, a freak of nature on the other team, where his arm just keeps going and going and going. And he somehow just gets to the basketball and it seems to catch other guys off guard. And we saw that a bit last year, but I feel like this preseason is happening every 2 or 3 minutes on the floor. The level of activity just seems insane. And I think it'll be more necessary than ever. I think as the year goes on, it'll become increasingly unpalatable to use Karl Anthony Towns like only as a drop big. And if you play Cat more at the level, which I think is where he's better and he has more activity. I know Dane Moore said as much on your podcast. That kind of necessitates that OG Anunoby is a backline defender and he's rotating over. He's helping on a big. He's helping on a cutter. I think he could set a career high in blocks this year doing that. And I just think it'll be a necessity for him to be a playmaker, because I think if this Knicks defense is passive and they play back, they're going to have issues, because I just don't think Cat is like that as a rim protector. I think everyone is ramped up, playing on a string, kind of like the Timberwolves 2 years ago, could lead to monster numbers for him, monster numbers to Bridges. I think that'll be enough to push him to first team, especially when the Knicks finish really good in defensive rating with that Cat weight dragging them down. But I don't know, Jeremy, what do you think about it?
I love it. I mean, yeah, it's exactly taking Alex's and going one step further to that point. It's again, it what I mentioned in terms of kind of the pride factor of wanting to prove what you're worth. I mean, yes, you could look at the overall accomplishments, but you still want to feel like you're adding value, and there is that hardware. Just in terms of the value, yes, it seems like OG's got this incredible reputation. Felt like we then certainly saw how he transformed this team the moment that he started with that Timberwolves game, and they just really didn't look back from there. And of course, while he was healthy, and then it just goes back to the health point. So, Gavin, this is one of my favorite predictions, just because I really want it to happen, and I hope it is. So, for my hope and sake of that, I'm just going to say yes.
To answer your question that you raised before, it was the season before last that he finished second team all defense. He also finished 7th in defensive player of the year voting. Coincidentally, to your point about the steals, that was also the year he led the league in steals at 1.9 steals per game. Last year, De'Aaron Fox, among qualified players, led the league in steals per game at 2. And so far in this preseason, OG is averaging 2.6 steals per 36 minutes, which is by far the team leader. Karl-Anthony Towns, interestingly enough, 2.1 steals per 36 minutes. So maybe that's something we should be keep an eye out for as well. I'm with Jeremy. I love the prediction. I think I've looked at the OG Anunoby Defensive Player of the Year odds a few times. Shout out to our friends at BetUS. Because I think if he, like, again, Marcus Smart, the only perimeter player who's won this in a dog's age. But like, if he plays 65 games and the Knicks are a top 5 defense, I just don't think it's nuts, because I think nobody who watches the Knicks like has an opinion other than that he's their most important defensive player. And like you said, we've seen it throughout the preseason. Alex, you already said some thoughts on OG, but anything you want to add to this one?
I'll just say, I wonder if we're understating how much he'll have to fight his own teammate for this particular honor. Because if Mikal Bridges plays all 82 again,
yeah,
and the Knicks have like a top 8 defense or something, like they're going to play, I think, at a high enough pace that like their defense probably won't be a top 3 defense or something. It won't be one of those where they're just slogging through every game and, having one of the lowest scoring team, whatever. Either way, I think the Iron Man thing will help Mikal. And obviously, my prediction has to come true for Gavin's prediction to come true first off, which that's double bold because
I feel like we're doing a 3-legged race throughout this episode now and throughout the season to get there.
Pretty much. Yeah. Because like for him to even be eligible for these, he has to do something that he hasn't done in 3 out of the last 4 years, which is play 65 games. And then beyond that, he has to outshine his own teammate in Mikal Bridges, who I think my only argument for this, and I think that the counting stats might end up favoring OG more, which would probably be the deciding factor of him getting the nod over Mikal Bridges, but mostly because he's going to, I think, get more blocks, like more help blocks, which is going to help. Like his stock numbers, I think, are going to be insane. The steals are going to be crazy because he's going to get to play the lanes a lot, like we saw in the preseason. But what we also saw in the preseason is that Mikal Bridges is going to be the guy that's front and center on the other team's best perimeter player as they bring the ball down the floor, as they get set up in their offense. That's the guy that's going to be, I think, handling that assignment most days. And so if that's the case, and if that's the thing that people see and start latching onto and being like, his impact, like when he's guarded the opposing team's best player, they've shot X, over the course of the whole season or whatever, those are stats that people do love to look at and measure a player's defensive, impact at this point. That might give Mikal the edge over OG. But I guess we won't know until we get there. I think it could be crazy that we might see a season where 2 players on the Knicks both get a substantial amount of all defense votes. Which maybe was a bold prediction in and of itself.
No, it is. I mean, Mikal finished second the year before OG finished 7th. He lost to Marcus Smart. But to your point about cannibalizing the votes, the year Smart won, Robert Williams was on that team. He got votes for Defensive Player of the Year. He actually got a first place vote, believe it or not. And Al Horford, also on Boston that year, ended up on some ballots. So like, and Rudy last year, Rudy Gobert. Like I don't know if Jaden McDaniels got any votes, but like Jaden McDaniels made all defense. Like I don't think I think as long as there's a clear delineation, like this guy is the most important defender on the team, I think that's the most important. And to your point about the counting stats, I think a lot of voters still care about that shit. Like, yeah, advanced stats matter a lot, but like, look at Jaren Jackson Jr. 2 years ago. Didn't he led the league in blocks, right, that year? I'm fairly certain. If he wasn't at the league lead, it was very high. Like, I think that resonates with a lot of these older voters who are like, look at the plethora of advanced stats that are available for defensive, analysis in the NBA, and they just like throw their hands up and be like, let me look and see who has a lot of blocks and a lot of steals. Like, I don't think we're past that. And honestly, maybe we shouldn't be past that. Like, that stuff matters. So, I like the prediction. It's spicy. It's spicy because it's the games played and obviously the achievement itself. Okay. So that means it's back to me, right? For my next scintillating prediction. Which of these should I go to? Now, Gavin, you said you didn't want to keep it. You didn't want to make it depressing. So I should return the favor, and I should do one of my only depressing one on my pod, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I think that there are less than 200 minutes remaining in Mitchell Robinson's Knick career. And my thought process on this one is pretty simple. And it dovetails with a prediction I think that Jeremy has coming up. For one, I think the Knicks are going to trade Mitchell Robinson. And I say that knowing like it's pretty silly to predict like a team will trade a player, because ultimately you're not going to trade a player. No team is going to trade a player unless the value is there. And who the hell knows if the value is going to be there for Mitchell Robinson in January and February. But on, factoring in that uncertainty, I think the Knicks are going to look at this situation and say, as long as there is enough value there for us where we could feel good about the player we're getting back, i.e., we feel like this guy can play 15 minutes a game for us in pretty much any playoff series, I think they will swing a deal, because I just think if you're trying to compete for a championship, the notion that you could have a $14 million salary slot on your roster that is as uncertain as I believe the Knicks feel that Mitchell Robinson is uncertain, because I just don't know how, if you're a team trying to win a championship, how you depend on a guy that has these things seem to keep happening. And then when you add on to that the fact that they made this trade for Karl Anthony Towns, and I know we have another opinion coming up that is going to be counter to this. I just think you trade for Karl Anthony Towns because you want Karl Anthony Towns to be your center. Maybe not 100% of the time, but in the biggest moments of the biggest games. So when you factor those two things in, and then as far as the 200 minutes goes, Shams, we initially got the December-January report. Shams has already come out and said it's not going to be December, it's going to be January. So I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, is it like January 15th might be the earliest? So, we're talking between that and the trade deadline, 7, 8, 9 games. Maybe he doesn't play every one of those games. If he does get in those games, what is he playing? 7 minutes a half, 15 minutes, add it up. I honestly almost went with like under 100, but I was like, that would have been really, I guess, a lot bolder. I could have said 0, but no, I think he'll play. I think it's important that he's going to get out on the court, show teams potentially what he has left, what he looks like, because otherwise he becomes really untradeable. But Alex, what are your thoughts there?
I'm kind of like back and forth on this one, if I'm being honest, because I think it's bold in the sense that I think that the Knicks do want to give it a try. I'm probably wrong about that.
Give Mitch and Cat a try.
Yeah, that's probably full cap on my part. That's just me speaking from the heart. But
I don't think it's crazy. I just think that Tibbs would look at what they managed to accomplish in Minnesota with Cat at the 4 and Rudy at the 5 and say, I would love to do that. Like that's Tibbs's like ideal. That's his dream girl. Like that's like two bigs doing like, having like a 2 center arrangement effectively, and being able to have 2 bigs, 1 rim.
Right.
Oh boy.
Jeez. Oh my
goodness. Title, Claudio? Title?
But glad we did that on this one.
Yeah.
we have a family show, John.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah, I could see Tibbs wanting to really give that a shot and an earnest look. I think that maybe At this point, unfortunately, if the Knicks end up parting ways with Mitch, I feel like it has to at this point be that they're just not confident in his health.
That's the biggest part of my prediction, to be very clear. I just don't think the team is confident in his health. That's all it is.
Yeah. And he'll have to come back, look super spry, super ready to go, and show no ill effects from that ankle injury. Because otherwise they're going to be like, if you're one turned ankle away from potentially putting us in a situation again where we're not going to have you for half the season, and you're not going to be able to play in the playoffs and whatever, that's just not going to jive with this team anymore. Like now at this point, they're all in. Like they need guys that could be on the floor. They need guys that are going to be impactful in their minutes and be ready to step in like right away. For as much as we've talked about like OG's injuries and whatever, for the most part, like when OG comes back from an injury, it's like he hasn't skipped a beat.
Yep.
Mitchell Robinson, it's been, unfortunately, like you have to work in like a 10-game ramp up process with him. Like he doesn't really come back and just look like himself immediately. There's always like a real rough stretch where you're like, ugh, like every minute that he's on the floor feels really tough right now until the point where it all just clicks and physically he's perfect and mentally he's all back there and everything's good again. And, from that perspective, I kind of think that you're right with this, but I do, from a devil's advocate perspective and just a optimist and a Mitchell Robinson lover perspective, I want it to not be true. And so I would love for this prediction to not be true, but I unfortunately could very much see it being true.
Gavin, before I get to you, I just want a couple things. One, I don't want it to be true either. I wouldn't mind it terribly because ultimately we're in the business now, this team, of winning championships, and like sentiment has to be put aside. But like Mitchell Robinson's not only the longest tenured Knick on this team, he is the second longest tenured Knick since of any player who has joined the team after the 90s other than Carmelo Anthony. And he could equal Melo if he stays the whole season. That is meaningful. Hashtag meaningful to me. The irony in what you said about Tibbs looking at Minnesota is you could make the argument, as many people have, that Minnesota team was built to beat one team, Denver. And they did that. And I am wondering how much the Knicks have their sights set on beating one team in their conference, and it's Boston. And this goes back to the prediction, because you could argue that Mitch, for as valuable as he is against a lot of teams, is not all that valuable against the Celtics because of the nature of how, like, Porzingis and the things that he is able to do on the floor. And I just wonder how much that factors in to their thinking, or do they have to have keep a bigger scope here and say it's not just about beating the Celtics, it's about beating all the teams that it takes to end up on the mountaintop. So I think all of this stuff kind of factors in. Gavin, what are your thoughts on this one?
So I don't want to go too far because you kind of hinted at it. I have a prediction that is in direct contrast to this later. So
you can save it if you want.
Yeah, I'll start off playing devil's advocate with myself a little bit and say, every time Mitch falls down, it looks like he's out for the season. And like that could just be enough for Leon Rose. And that sucks because I don't think that was the case early in his career. Like he was just a little bit of a springier, like more fluid athlete. He put on the muscle, had that 1 year that was disastrous, seemed to have found like a good middle ground. And now we're kind of back to him just like, it just doesn't feel good like every single time in the playoffs. It's not even the playoffs, in the regular season too. Like he will take a fall. It'll look awkward. He'll be slow to get up. He'll be limping around for a few possessions. And there's a certain point where to your argument, when you're in the business of winning championships, like that is just an unacceptable amount of risk. And it's like, it's like, all right, he's going to be out there. Like, how good is he going to be? I think there's real utility to having him in the playoffs. Like obviously was so good against Joel Embiid last year, and there's just no one else on the roster that's going to approximate that. I'll get into it more next episode, but I do think there are ways he can be really effective against the Celtics, and he never really got a chance to show it against Boston last year. And I think his rebounding can certainly hurt them. But I also think it's a totally reasonable prediction. It seems like every breadcrumb is pointing to the idea that the Knicks do not want Mitchell Robinson on this team, or not that they don't want him on this team.
Yeah,
that in his state, you know what I'm saying? In his state of injury, for getting maybe two guys who could be in the rotation for a team that's lacking some depth, maybe getting another quality wing option. Like they were clearly trying to trade him for Karl Anthony Towns all summer. So like the front office does not consider him invaluable. They do not consider him like a must keep. So I think it's totally plausible that you're right. But I'll stop there. Jeremy, what do you think about it?
Do you want to go right to your prediction, Jeremy,
No,
or do you want to?
I'll address yours first.
Okay.
I don't think your prediction is that bold, John.
Okay.
But the reason is, and I think you laid it out, where if you're confident that he's going to be traded and he's not coming back until January, there's a finite window. Yeah. So if anything, I feel like saying that you think that he will never play another minute for the Knicks, that would be bold, because
I don't believe that though.
Okay. That's fine. I'm just saying that the direction we've gone.
You want me to change it to under 100?
It's your prediction. I'm just challenging it, because I feel like that's not that bold of a prediction.
In the spirit of the past prediction that I made with Andrew about Julius and Obi playing at least 100 minutes. It was 100 minutes, right, Andrew?
It was 100 minutes and they played like 25.
No, they played 70 something. Stop it. Don't lie.
They could have played 5 and we all would have missed it, John. It's the point of the exercise.
Who are you to make the rules? Yeah. Okay. I'll make it 100. Officially changed. Keep going.
Okay. There's this thought as well with Mitchell Robinson, where he's got to show he's healthy. And I'm also wondering why he has to show that. We know who he is. We know what he does. There's nothing that Mitchell Robinson can do on the court that is any different than what I'm already expecting. It's purely health. And so if he's cleared by doctors, if he's rehabbing with the team, there's the thought process of, well, what if he just doesn't play? What if they bring him along and then he just doesn't see action? Now, maybe he does. Maybe they get him into games. But if you're the Knicks, do you want to risk that if you view him as the tradable asset that you're describing with the $14 million salary slot? I ultimately don't think it's the wisest of decisions. I would like to see at times, of course, Cat at the 4. Primarily, he should be a 5. That's where you maximize a lot of what he does. I agree that Mitchell Robinson, if we want to talk about matchups, but briefly mentioned the Embiid of it all. And of course, before Embiid injured Mitchell Robinson, that was a key point. You can't get to a team like Denver unless you get through potentially a team like Philadelphia. And even then, the Knicks might not play either of those teams. So it's good to have versatility. It's good to have options. Ideally, you're able to make it work with Mitchell Robinson because he's a very talented player, but I just don't think that it's going to work. But I ultimately don't know if it's entirely injury driven for why the Knicks might look to move Mitch. It could very well be he's a talented guy. We just are going in a different direction philosophically, fundamentally. Our offense is just schematically different, and that's where we want to focus, not having someone who's standing in the dunker spot on offense quite in that way. So
we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on this. Just like quick yes, no. Does it have you guys even noticed / does it concern you at all that Mitch hasn't been on the bench for home games during the preseason, Alex?
Doesn't really bother me because I think the Knicks have always been pretty chill with the whole does a guy spend time with the team when he's injured thing. So no, I'm not super worried about it. I think he's just rehabbing, and they're just focus on that. Especially because he's so far out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
it's a while away.
Yeah.
Gav, same.
Yeah, I think the Knicks know there's going to be foreboding Instagram posts if he's on the bench. There's going to be foreboding Instagram posts if he's not on the bench. So why not just let him do some work? I think it's okay. Especially like we go deep into the regular season. He's not. That would maybe say something, but for now, I don't think a lot of it.
All right, Jeremy, you have this is our final prediction on this show before we head over to Locked On for the second half of this episode.
So my prediction is that Mitchell Robinson will be traded for a top 100 player. And I don't know how you can really view top 100. You could say EPM, you could say VORP. I mean, you could, it's kind of one of those nod your head like, yep, that's a legitimate 100 guy. Almost gut feeling like, we can talk, of course, about what he brings to the table, what he doesn't, why he's not a fit, all of that. And I get it. And the reason I think this is a bold prediction is because it seems as though the public opinion has resided to one of two things. Number one is he's getting traded, but he's not healthy. So his value sucks and you're going to trade, you're selling low, and then suddenly you're not getting anything good. And the other one is, well, because his value is so low, just keep him and figure it out in the offseason. And for the first one, I understand it. I get why the thought process of, well, because he's hurt, it's certainly a factor. But every trade the Knicks seemingly make that makes them better is using talent plus draft equity to get something larger than that. Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, the Knicks used Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and the Pistons pick to get Karl Anthony Towns. I think Karl Anthony Towns is a better player than Julius Randle overall. That's where they went. They used Bojan Bogdanovic and other salary and picks to get Mikal Bridges. They, typically try to use filler, whether it's getting, Cam Reddish and a draft pick and other filler for Josh Hart, or really any of the ways they've gone about this. They've built together a compelling package. And for the second point, I just don't think the Knicks are going to say in a season where they've traded all of their future draft equity pretty much, we're good. We're just going to ride it out and see how it works. So I have some ideas for people who I think that they would target. I'm going to hang on to that because I need some midseason content too. But in the meantime, I truly believe that the Knicks look at someone like Mitchell Robinson and they say, hey, there are only 4 players last year who, let's see, where was it? 4 players last year who had an offensive rebounding percentage of over 15 and a block percentage of over 4. And that was Day'Ron Sharpe, Clint Capella, Neemias Queta, and Mitchell Robinson himself. And I just think they're in a league where there aren't a ton of great centers, and it's really tough to find cheap talent. You've got an option, Mitchell Robinson, where with a couple other things, and we can go into that later, you're able to kind of just get someone who legitimately helps your team, and Knicks fans would support. So that's my bold prediction.
Before I turn it to Alex and Gavin, my only response is a question. How much for you does it factor in that now in a league where the going rate for, I don't even know if I want to say average starting centers, Wendell Carter Jr. and Ivica Zubac, I butchered that, just both signed extensions for $20 million annually. And those are those guys like between 15 and 20 in the league? Or are they a little bit below 20, whatever they are, they're somewhere around there. How much does it factor in that Mitch is on the books for 12.9 not this upcoming season, but for next season?
Probably quite a bit. If you're acquiring him, you don't have to worry about any new deals. If you want to look to extend him next summer, certainly an option you can do with 140%. The injury factor is also going to be another thing where I'm sure it will impact his market. Don't get me wrong, but I think that there's enough upside and positive abilities that Mitchell Robinson brings. We've seen it in the playoffs in consecutive years. I mean, that's someone that you want on your team. It's the health factor, of course, which is going to impact his value, but for some team is going to be worth the risk, especially if they do not have a center that they can trust.
Yeah, no, it's essentially he's making backup center money in the league as it is today. So I think that if there's some team that's up against, whether it's the tax, the first apron, the second apron, someone might look at that as like, oh, there's our way to duck the money issues for this year. Alex, what are your thoughts on this one?
First off, I need to know, Jeremy, how many minutes does he play before he gets traded for a top 100 player?
I'll be bold. I'll say 0.
Okay.
He's straight up just salary.
Yes.
Okay.
But good salary, not just, flotsam, but actually a good player.
I guess my main thing, because of what you just said, John, I think this is pretty bold, just with the caveat of getting a top 100 player back, because you're going to have to get another underpaid top 100 player back. I think it's the big thing, because otherwise, what salary do you use to get this deal done with not being able to include multiple minimum salaries, not being able to take back more money than you're sending out? Are they going to try to acquire someone who's still on a rookie deal or something like that? Like, is that the route that they go?
To be clear, they can combine minimums after December 15th. I learned this after I sent out something a few months ago that I got that wrong. Between December 15th and the trade deadline, you could compile together minimums. The thing is, they don't have the minimums to combine because their minimums are now all part of the rotation. If you look at Shamet, since they're probably going to keep him, Campaign, and it's Sims, right? Is the only other? Am I forgetting someone?
Pretty much.
I think I think that's it.
Yeah. So there you go. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah, it makes it difficult. And then it's like, is there a player that you could find that would make it worth including both Mitch and like Precious Achiuwa to make some salary work or something like that? Like,
it's tough.
Yeah, it gets a little tough. So I very much look forward, Jeremy, to the cap or no cap episode where I see how this goes and what they could possibly do to make this happen. I would say just on the caveat of the level of player that I'm a smidge skeptical that they'll be able to acquire that good of a player for Mitchell Robinson, especially if he has not played a single minute and shown that he's back to his best form of himself. So that actually, I asked that minutes question jokingly at first, but now it's sort of a huge factor in this to me. So yeah, I think this is pretty spicy. This is getting up there on the Scoville scale, at least a ghost pepper for me.
Gavin, last word before we switch over to you guys.
Sure. I was going to give Jeremy some credit. I think this is clearly the boldest prediction we've had so far.
Wow.
I've always gotten kind of a feel that the rest of the league does not particularly value Mitchell Robinson compared to how like people like us who watch him every day value him. Like it always feels like, yeah, he's kind of bumbling. He's kind of awkward. Like, all right, but you're not seeing like he's totally dominant on the glass, has turned into like just, I think does not get enough credit for just being an exceptionally smart defender, as his like physical talents have not gone away, but he's not, I think, the total freak of nature in terms of just his ability to like jump and block like a James Harden step back three we saw early in his career. And because of that, and because of the injuries, and because of the fact that his salary, as you guys have mentioned, like I think it's going to be really hard to get a top 100 guy for him. And like the formats of trades we've seen people like kind of preface and throw out there are like, could you get like two pretty good rotation guys for him? And that's more so the model I was thinking the Knicks would go if they can get a top 100 guy for him. That's a home run. And even with my Mitch-centric, Mitch favorable prediction, like I would have to be open to that. I was kind of just going through the teams while Jeremy was talking. The ones I'd pinpoint quickly as candidates, like I know everyone's mentioned the Pelicans and Trey Murphy. That would seem to me like just a really heavy price for Mitchell Robinson, but they have a clear glut on the wing. That would be really cool if that could somehow work out. They do not have a center right now. It's Daniel Tice and Yves Missi, if I'm saying his name correctly. Not a lot there. The Lakers, I think, could really use, like, even though Anthony Davis starting at center is probably the way they go, I think they want like that size, that rebounding, that defense would make them feel a lot more serious than they currently are and closer to the best version of that team. The Suns, I was over and over again last season throwing out like Mitch to the Suns, Julius to the Suns trades. Like he would be transformative for a team that's so offensively focused. If the Knicks could get, I don't know, Royce O'Neal and like Ryan Dunn back, I would do that in a heartbeat just to really strengthen up their wings. So I see a lot of teams out West. I would be kind of stunned if the Knicks traded him in conference that would want Mitchell Robinson. I think I'm just like struggling to come up with the top 100 player that realistically could get dealt. So I'm just going to end this by giving Jeremy a lot of credit. Again, I think it's a bold prediction, and I'd be really fascinated to see who it is if it happens.
Well done, Jeremy. You have flummoxed the panel. As only you can.
It's Bold Predictions Podcast. There we go.
It is indeed a Bold Predictions Podcast. Okay. And on that note, we are going to head over, or hopefully you are going to head over for the second half of this Bold Predictions Podcast to the Locked On Knicks feed, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, I will just end this half of the episode by saying thank you for listening. Don't forget, give us a 5-star rating, positive review, all those things to help us out. And yeah, we will see you on the other half with the Locked On Knicks guys.